And foremost, Travis and Tracy are here and they're going to make some introductory remarks. We're going to have Tracy, MLA Tracy Allard, come make some remarks here first. Welcome up, Tracy. Let's give her a big hand, everyone. Tracy, the mic is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I see it's kind of like church where nobody sits in the front couple of rows. Fair enough, fair enough. I think we're scary. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be here in person with you. It's a pleasure to see your faces. It's a pleasure to join you and talk about the future of Alberta, and I'm really grateful for all of you that have come up tonight. I'm grateful for those of you that were able to make it out last weekend and meet the Premier. I really feel like Alberta has been through some challenging times, and certainly when I was a candidate for election, I had no idea what I was up against and what I would be up against in this term. It's been challenging for everyone, and I grieve the challenges that people have called into my office and shared, the families that have been fighting, the churches that have struggled, the community support groups that have, broken apart, and I grieve that, and I'm sorry for that, and I hope that we as a province can move forward and heal together, and I hope that we as a conservative movement can move forward and heal together. I really think now is the time for us to band together as a movement. None of us have gone through the hard work of the last several years, including the unity movement, to break apart now. So I really implore you tonight as we talk to really have an open conversation. That's the goal. I really want to have an open dialogue. It's been very, very challenging to meet with constituents via Zoom or call or Skype. It's not the same as having a coffee with a friend. It's not the same as having you in my office. It's just not the same. So thank you for being here tonight. And before I continue too much further, because I want to leave most of the time for questions, I think politicians like to talk, and I've learned that I'm becoming one because I can talk and talk and talk. But I'd rather listen to you and answer your questions than take up the time. So I'm going to keep it short, but I want to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague and my dear friend, and I would argue the best finance minister in Alberta's history, Minister of Finance, Travis Allard.
Well, Tracy, thank you for that. You always embarrass me with that comment. Thank you. I couldn't serve with a better colleague in this region, and we truly work together to represent the people of the region and the people of Grande Prairie. Tracy, thank you for serving. Thanks for coming up. This is really a great group. I look around, I see family and friends and people from my board, Tracy's board, people that were part of the conservative unity effort, people that care about the province, people that care about this region. Thanks for taking a Friday evening to come out here. Nolan, thanks for organizing this. Monica, Bruce, Joel, thank you so much. And others. Shouldn't have started that. I'm going to make a few comments. I'll probably won't be quite as brief as Tracy. I want to make a few comments about the budget, so bear with me. Indulge me for just a bit. I'm not suggesting everything's about the budget, because it's not. But a budget is effectively a document, a plan, a numerical plan that lays out the results and the projections for a jurisdiction or an entity, and that's what Budget 2022 is. And as we take a look at that document, it really is a hopeful document. It shows the fiscal progress we've made, hard-fought progress over the last 3 years. I'll talk a wee bit about that. It really demonstrates reports on the great economic growth and economic recovery that we've experienced in this province in the last year. That's what the budget document does. And lastly, the budget document really highlights those priorities for this government over the next year. So I'm going to talk very briefly about it. Firstly, first on fiscal progress. A year ago, I could have never envisioned presenting a balanced budget for this province. It seemed like a different universe. At that point in time, we were dealing with bond rating agencies and creditors. A year and a half ago, we couldn't even sell bonds in the market. Capital markets were frozen. We had an oil price crash. Energy prices actually went negative for a day. Our bonds were not very popular. And yet we were spending record amounts of money in healthcare, support for businesses and individuals, and it looked bleak. I met with the Premier every morning for about 2 weeks. I would bring my ADM of finance, and I would tell him, Premier, based on the trajectory we're on, by June 10th, we run out of cash. That was where we were at. And every day we tested, I talked to my ADM of finance, a deeply experienced ADM, well respected on Bay Street and in capital markets. And he was so wise. We never tested, we never floated bonds till we believed we could do it successfully. Other provinces went out prematurely and failed, which is a bad look. But we had to wait weeks before we could finally get some bonds sold. That was the fiscal environment we found ourselves in during the depths of the pandemic and the energy price collapse. It was hard, it was tough. So to rise in the legislature a week ago and present to Albertans a balanced budget was, I'm going to say, nothing short of miraculous. Because it was like there was great favor on this province over this last year. I have to say, I get a bit emotional, but I have to say that. But there's a story to that. It's been a lot of hard work. In budget 2019, we inherited a government that spent $10 billion more than similar provinces on a per capita basis. We had an upward trajectory in spending of 4% per year. And that was not only the NDP, that was previous BC governments. Times were good. Cash was easy, and we spent like we were supposed to borrow. That was what we did as a province. So what we did in our first budget, we made a plan to turn that spending down, basically flatten it. And I thought, how hard can that be? How hard can that be? Well, folks, it was hard. And I recall shortly after we presented Budget 2019 with our 4-year fiscal plan, a plan to balance, I went down to Toronto to present this to bond rating agencies. I thought they were going to love it. Probably get a credit upgrade on the way home. Well, I found out 2 things. They said, well, that's a neat plan on paper, but we don't believe you'll be able to deliver. And by the way, we don't like the energy industry either. And we went home. We flew back. I haven't been physically on Bay Street since, but friends, I'm going there a week from now. And this is what I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them that in the last 3 years, as a province, as Albertans, we have flattened that spending. In fact, we inherited an operational spending of $48.4 billion. 3 years in, our operational spend, non-COVID, operational spend was 48.9, basically flat. That included 2% per year increase for health. Why? Because we had to shelve some of the reforms that we wanted to make. That means a lot of ministries tightened their belt by about 4 notches to get that done. Not education, not health, but many others. All that to say, we delivered. During the dark days of COVID, we basically, as we got bumped off our fiscal plan, we had to identify a couple of fiscal anchors that would inform our fiscal decisions. One was we needed to ensure we kept a strong balance sheet as measured by net debt to GDP, and so we committed to stay well below a 30% ratio. We maxed out at 22, and we're on our way down to about 16, which will make Alberta's balance sheet the strongest balance sheet in the nation. Major progress. The other fiscal anchor was that we were going to, in spite of the pandemic, we were going to align our spending on a per capita basis with that of other provinces. We weren't going to do it in 1 year. We were going to do it in 3. But we've done it. By this upcoming year, we will have aligned that spending. So to stand up in front of Albertans, declare a balanced budget was incredible. Now, part of the story is increased energy prices, and that is so welcome. But we didn't use $85 or $90 or $115 WTI prices. We used $70 for 2022, $69 for 2023, and $66 for 2024. Very cautious, I would say right now, very cautious pricing. And that's left us with a surplus of $500 million, $900 million, and $700 million for the upcoming 3 years. So yes, energy price increases were positive, but we're not using these wild prices today to balance the budget. We used very modest pricing. And the other thing I should say, had we stayed on that spending trajectory that we inherited, had we not made the hard decisions to put this province on a sustainable fiscal trajectory, instead of a $500 million surplus, we would have been reporting a $6 billion deficit for the upcoming year. So that hard work paid off. Yes, we've balanced the budget. Yes, energy prices have come up. But we've really balanced the budget because of fiscal discipline that Albertans have bought into by and large across the province, and by positioning the economy for disproportionate investment attraction and growth, which results in expanded fiscal capacity. Because here's what's happening on the economic front. As we've reduced our corporate tax rate, we took a lot of heat for that. We dropped our corporate tax rate. We committed to Albertans before the election we were going to do that as part of our effort to create the most compelling, competitive business environment possible. We also took on regulatory burden. We reduced it by about 20%. Work continues. Lastly, we focused on sectors where we were naturally competitive and worked to understand what more we needed to do to position them for investment attraction. And here's what's happening. Investment is flooding into this province by the billions. We're heading into an economic renaissance in Alberta. We're projecting GDP growth of 5.5% this year, breaking the ceiling that we set in 2014. We haven't broken it since then. We're going to break it and charge through it, projecting GDP growth of 3.5 and then 2.8 in the out years. It's an incredible economic renaissance, and all we did as a government was position the province to be most competitive. Alberta entrepreneurs and business people did all the rest, like they do. That's our strongest asset in this province. You know, during the depths of the pandemic, the Premier called his friend. He was a CEO of Laurentian Bank. He was in Quebec. The Premier was talking to him about our great fiscal and economic challenges, and his friend, I should know his name, but I don't. His friend interrupted him. Said, just a minute. I know things are tough in Alberta, but you're going to be good. You're going to be okay, and here's why. There's no other province with the people that are resourceful, entrepreneurial, that are self-responsible, and will rise from the ashes, and that's what we've seen in the last 18 months. Albertans have stepped out. They've taken risks, invested, done to work when it wasn't easy. And the capital markets have responded to our attractive business environment. And we're seeing investment flood in by the billions in the tech sector, financial services, aviation and aerospace, even manufacturing, agriculture manufacturing, forestry, hydrogen, petrochemical manufacture. Our economy has never been this diversified, probably in the last 30, 40 years, maybe beyond that. All of that results in increased fiscal capacity. Last metric, and then I promise I won't share any more metrics. We reduced our corporate tax rate from 12 to 8%. The opposition nailed us every day in the question period over the $4.7 billion giveaway to corporations. And so I wrote a check every year of $4.7 billion to corporations. The Premier would look at me and go, Travis, what do you got? What's our defense? I said, Premier, our defense will be when investment pours into this province, Albertans are back to work, and we're growing this economy at 5% per year. That's our defense. He wasn't that happy with that every day, because it was hard to defend in the immediate. But friends, now, can we ever defend? At an 8% corporate tax rate, we will collect $400 million more dollars in corporate tax revenues every year in the next 3 years, more than the NDP collected at 12%. That's the story of an expanding economy, expanded fiscal capacity. And that doesn't measure all the benefit to families, to the next generation of Albertans who now have a career opportunity, who now can find a job and provide for their families. That's just simply measured at one line of the budget, and that's corporate tax revenue. So it's been a tough couple of years. It's been a tough couple of years on the fiscal front. It's been a tough couple of years on the economic front. But friends, we are turning the corner. We are turning the corner. Now, you might be here and say, you know, that's fine, but my utility bills are going up. Have you filled your car up with gas lately? And I've still not had a raise.
Yeah. You did.
We took a 5% cut. But this recovery is unlevel. I totally get it. There are some Albertans feeling pinched right now, and I can appreciate that. I'm very confident that this rising economy will provide more opportunities for almost all Albertans, but in the meantime, it's a bit tough, and that's not lost on me. We're projecting inflation to be 3.2% this upcoming year. It was 3.2 last year, quite a bit lower than many other provinces. We have a cost of housing advantage in this province. We have, you wouldn't know it, but we have an advantage when it comes to the cost of diesel fuel. You wouldn't know it when you go to gas your car or truck. We do have some advantages. We have between a 6 and 12% advantage on many consumables. Why? Because we don't have a provincial sales tax. Every other province does. So we have some advantages. You know, in this budget, we did introduce a measure, a consumer protection measure. If natural gas prices go up like there are in Europe or Asia, then we will provide rebates. Effectively, all Albertans will benefit from an old resource. The trader price is $6.50. That was patterned after Ralph Klein's measure that he brought in the early 2000s, indexed for inflation. We have done that in this budget, and we're looking at anything else we might do. But when I look at the root causes of inflation, which are a combination of probably liberal monetary policy, and I get that central bankers needed to provide liquidity, and they did over the last 2 years. Inflation is also driven by fiscal policy, governments putting too much cash out in the economy. We've seen that, I think, federally at times, certainly in the US and in Canada. Some of the programs that the federal government put out were really important, but I would suggest maybe weren't turned down in time. That's also impacting labor mobility. Providing disincentives for Canadians to rise up and go where there's opportunity. So we need some of those programs to wind down. But between monetary policy and excessive government spending, fiscal policy, you combine that with strained supply chains, it creates a great environment for inflation, and we see it today. So we get a lot of pressure. I get a lot of pressure as finance minister, even from my colleagues, to open up the checkbook and spread money around the province to take a little pressure on, for inflation. And I'm pretty hesitant to do that. I'm not saying we'll never do that, but I'll just tell you why. Additional fiscal stimulus in the economy right now will do what? It will create more inflationary pressure. Is that really a defensible government policy? What about if we borrow are we willing to borrow from future generations just to alleviate our pressure today? Because that's what we would be doing. Is that defensible? I heard a rate cap on electricity.
My bill was $1,900 last month.
The real costs of electricity are driven. There's a number of things, but they're real costs.
It was $900 last year at this time.
Yeah, and ours too. I found out from my wife. She said, "What are you guys doing about electricity? We can't afford to pay our bill." It's real.
Yeah, that's a mortgage payment.
It's real. And I'll be interested in ideas, but they're real costs. Costs driven by a carbon tax implemented by the NDP and the federal government. We fought it right up to the Supreme Court. We lost. Also driven by excessive overbuild in our system. Years ago, by previous governments, we're paying for that in your transmission charges today. Thirdly, the previous government prematurely went from coal to gas. That saddled Albertans with $1.4 billion in extra charges that we're still paying for today. I don't like it, but they're real costs. Either consumers pay for them or taxpayers. We need to choose as Albertans. They're real costs. So I'm interested in your views around that. We are looking at possible measures to alleviate some cost of living. This is tough. It is tough. But bottom line, as I listen to economists and as I evaluate the best, most defensible, most durable and beneficial measures, principles that governments can do during times of inflation, it's spend less, borrow less, and tax less. That's truly, I believe, the most defensible, beneficial policy. In time, it is the right answer. In the short term, it's tough. It really is. So I'm going to wrap up. I've been way too long. It's been a hard 2 years. Tracy talked about the hardship, the division we see in our families, our churches, our communities, our chambers. It's real. I suspect there's nobody here that hasn't had at a minimum a strained relationship. And some of you are perhaps estranged from family or close friends over events of the last 2 years. I grieve it. I think we all grieve it. I wish there were easy answers. I sat around I was part of, contributed to the Priorities Cabinet Committee who made the COVID rules. And we fought over those decisions, almost literally at times. They were brutal. There was only a host of bad options. And we've navigated this imperfectly. And for that I apologize. But we've navigated it in the best way we thought we could at the time, and I say that in a collective sense. Because when you go to that table, you debate, you bring your position, and you debate it and you defend it for all you're worth, but when you're done, you rise up and you support the decision of the table. And if you can't do that, you resign. Those are your options. That's how governance works. And that was really hard, but we've navigated this with best intentions. We've navigated it imperfectly. And I deeply apologize and regret the division that's out there. In part, no doubt, caused by some of the decisions of government. So with that, I'm happy to entertain questions along with my colleague Tracy.
Thank you, Travis. Guys, one more time, I'm just going to reiterate the guidelines. We have